Unfortunately, patients who are self-medicating with cannabis are still often criminalized. So what consequences may have if they take away a patient's cannabis during the treatment, like the police do in a process?
If somebody is on a medicine that is benefiting them, that they feel is life-saving, and they're stripped of this medicine, it is a form of torture. The problem is that these reports get made and they sit on somebody's desk to collect dust, and they never get in the hands of the elected officials that need to read that report. And so the reports are not changing the minds of the people who are in power. Taking away a patient's access to a natural flower seems like a violation of human right. You know, it's just it's really tragic. I wish the governments would reprioritize their law enforcement to focus on issues that are really troubling our society. And I think people having access to a natural flower that's generally fairly benign, very mild side effects compared to the prescriptions that I write for patients every day. The support for medical cannabis is very high in all of these countries, and if the government would just listen to their own people and start, and guarantee that the plant is decriminalized, we should not be criminalizing and chasing people for trying to access a natural flower. It's a waste of taxpayer money. It's a waste of law enforcement energy that should be going toward real crimes. We had, remember, the National Academy of Science report, remember, from last year. Our own federal government issued a very important breakthrough report that showed that, where they took 10,000 clinical trials and ranked them in terms of scientific credibility, and they confirmed that at least in 3 areas where it was, chronic pain, nausea and vomiting, and spasticity of MS, they confirmed that there was strong scientific evidence to support cannabis use for these illnesses. And yet still, you're right, we have the governments ignoring their own reports from their own federal agencies, and it's tough. I'm not sure. I keep saying, I've been at this now for 15 years, attempting to do research on this very complex plant, and I can tell you that every year I keep thinking, oh, we're finally at the tipping point and things are really going to change, but I don't see the kind of movement that I hoped and dreamed about. And I think part of it is that we were relying so much on the research to lead us. We keep saying, oh, we need more data. If we could only get data from randomized controlled trials, we would finally persuade them. But the data already exists. We have, thousands of controlled trials that have already been published in peer-reviewed medical journals confirming a myriad of benefits from cannabis, but it's not helping change public policy. And the only way we're changing is not by waiting for the elected officials, right? You see, the changes that are happening are because of people power, patients galvanizing, creating a groundswell and going to the ballot themselves and trying to vote laws into place. But if you rely on the elected officials to create the reforms, it's never going to happen. They're way behind the public. And so I don't know. I still have hope that if we can win this lawsuit in the U.S. and force the government to license other growers for research, then maybe if we're finally allowed to use real-world cannabis in studies, there may be a chance that we'll be able to demonstrate efficacy. But if we continue to be forced to use this low-quality, our studies will continue to be undermined by this substandard study drug. And then I have no faith in science to be able to, it's just a very difficult plant to study in controlled trials. It's hard because, as we said, each patient is unique in how they respond to this, and maybe ultimately the best thing to do is just decriminalize the plant worldwide and treat it as an herbal supplement, as a standard nutraceutical like any other herbal supplement, and maybe that's the solution. But we must stop criminalizing all plants, whether it's cannabis or psilocybin or ibogaine. All of these plants need to be, the government needs to stop prohibiting them, because it's very hard to study them in a clinical trial when the government is criminalizing them. So,
is prohibition protecting the young people? Are they using less cannabis because of prohibition?
no, I think prohibition is a failure. It's been a failed policy for, the last, since whatever, 1970 in the US, when they implemented the Controlled Substances Act. I think that really proved that prohibition does not work, does not prevent young people from accessing. The best way to prevent kids from having access is a tax and regulate model. And I think, sadly, even that model has been disappointing. In the US, we've seen giant corporations kind of steamrolling the small businesses and consolidation taking place. It's very unhelpful. So I'm not sure I know the best way to do this anymore. I thought maybe regulating it. I'm starting to think that maybe the best approach is just pure decriminalization and letting everybody grow their own, having, some kind of plant limits maybe for each person to grow a small amount in their yards. And because I think the system is not working. What we're doing in the US is just promoting corporate greed, and it's not helping patients who are sick. And the sick patients are still forced to buy on the illegal market, and so it leaves them living every day in fear of arrest and prosecution. So I don't know, it's tough. But I do think, for years I thought tax and regulate was the only right approach, like what we do with alcohol and tobacco and things like that. But that also doesn't prevent kids from, although at least you can you can check people's age and refuse to sell them. But I don't know. I don't know what the solution is anymore. It's much more nebulous at this point.
In Europe, all the products that contain cannabinoids are now classified as novel food. And from the reason because we cannot trace safe usage history concerning cannabinoids. What do you think of this classification?
I don't know. I think anything that moves cannabis into something like when cannabis gets classified as either an agricultural product or a food, I think that's good for, as long as it gets it out of the prohibited class and into something where it can be made available to the public. I think that's beneficial,
How European Food Safety Authority has set a still safe daily dose of THC and CBD in a healthy adult population. How could we professionally explain those limits, which are 0.0 milligram of THC per kilo of bodily weight and 0.007 milligrams per kilogram of bodily weight?
I don't know where they came up with those numbers. I mean, I'm not sure what...
Are they logical anyhow?
Yeah, I'm curious if they can reference some articles that would, suggest why they're picking those limits. Because in the US, we don't put limits on, we let people, self-titrate, you know what I mean? So the patients adjust the dose as they need to manage their symptoms. And so to put arbitrary ceiling on what people can take doesn't seem even intellectually honest, because I don't think they can cite any science to support that. So I'm just curious where that came from, and I don't know if your government could provide some references